Hello, everyone. Welcome to Pride at Summit 2021, organized by Pride Circle. The aim of this summit is to foster belonging in education and focuses on spotlighting inclusive learning, building opportunities and creating safe spaces for LGBTQIA+ learners across the nation. Their aim sort of goes beyond just initiating a dialogue around inclusion in education, bringing all the stakeholders under educational ecosystem together to generate ideas, dialogues, and opportunities towards an inclusive world. I'm Shemal Pandya, a queer design educator from Mumbai. My pronouns are he, they, and I teach design at undergraduate and postgraduate level in different universities across the country, including NIT Ahmedabad, MIT Pune, the Design Village Noida, and Ambedkar University, Delhi. My research revolves around understanding the agency of designers in spatial geographies, role of sexual sites in urban production processes, feminist and queer pedagogies for education, student activism, etc. I acknowledge the caste and geographic privilege that enables me to do the work that I do. I'm pleased to have Ernesto and Yashwardhan with me today in this panel. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Okay, I am Ernesto Noronha and I teach at IIM Ahmedabad. I have been working on the issues of diversity and inclusion for quite some time. My most recent research is on LGBT, on the LGBT community in the workplace and the issues that they face in the workplace in terms of diversity and inclusion. Thanks.
I'm Yashwardhan Narayanan. I'm a student in grade 12th from Tagore International School, Vasant, Vihar, New Delhi. I'm someone with various interests like sports, psychology, and a lot of creative fields. And I sort of have a different personality as compared to most of the people of my age. I've been into social work with an aim to sort of eliminate negativity from around us. And I understand the need for inclusivity, better education, and awareness about various things for everyone. I work with this campaign called Breaking Barriers Campaign, India's first student-led human rights campaign, started in 2013 by our school.
Thank you, Ernesto. Thank you, Yashwardhan. It's great to have you here. Today's panel is talking about LGBTQIA+ inclusion in classroom. Some areas that we hope to sort of cover are the need of inclusion in school and college campuses, how educators can leverage experience and knowledge to foster inclusion in their classroom, the impact of young allyship, and also examine some strategies and practices that can be used to create safe space for queer students across the country. Now, schools and colleges, at least for me, have often been, conceptualized as a sanitary professional spaces where educators come to teach and learners come to learn. And sort of despite sort of immense popular imagination in like numerous films and literature and comics, sort of challenging that continuously and providing a sort of alternative or a subversive reading of such educational spaces, this has been the premise by which the policies and strategies and expectations of behavior sort of in these spaces is looked at. However, in such conceptualization, it leaves out a huge, according to me, it's huge population of people who do not fit these sort of neat norms of expected social position and behavior, sort of continuously othering a lot of people in the process. This brings me to my first question, which is like, what do you think is a classroom? What is its function and purpose? And what is an inclusive classroom? How do you imagine it being like? And have you experienced this kind of disconnect between your personal life and the so-called professional life or so-called student life? And what do you think about when you think of the word safe space?
Okay, should I go? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I would think a classroom is a place where you can challenge, the dominating ideas or hegemonic ideas. Okay, you can challenge, certain norms, the expected norms, and all this would provide a safe space, because if you can do this, you are providing a safe space. Okay. A classroom is where people should feel like, expressing themselves. They should be open. They should be, it's always going to be a safe space if faculty are open to issues that are raised by students, irrespective of whether they belong to the LGBT community or any other background. Okay, because here we are talking about issues, which challenge the dominating discourse, okay, or the prevalent discourse, okay, and students should have a chance to do that. That's what I would think a classroom is meant to be.
I absolutely agree with what Ernesto said. For me, an ideal classroom means that and a basic environment to allow every student to be able to, especially in schools, be able to learn from their surroundings, educate themselves, and we'll get to the importance of right education, which of course in today's world we lack quite a lot. And it is, it should be a place where young people don't feel isolated or even unwanted in the school. And it's relevant to a lot of people that, feeling unwanted, feeling isolated. It has happened to me a lot. As I said, I have a very different personality as compared to a lot of other people. And a safe space for me will be one that, firstly, it allows a very welcoming and supportive environment for every person, for all, even LGBT plus young people to come out into, not just LGBT plus, in fact, for anyone to come out into. So yeah, that will be a safe space for me. Things are not brushed under the carpet. One's identity is normal, is treated normally by everyone around. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a place where you can talk about ideas. You can talk about anything that you wish to talk about, and people are open to and listening to what you're saying. That's what I would think is a safe space.
But at least in my experience, that is not what classrooms have been about at school level or my undergraduate university or my postgraduate university. I went to some of the good schools, colleges in the country. And however, it was always sort of met with this kind of oh, wait, why are you expressing this? Is this relevant to the class? Is this making sense or not? What has your experience been like?
So I would think faculty should be first and foremost open to what is coming from students, open to being questioned. Okay. So the questioning should take place and students should question, while faculty should respond to everything that students have to say. It would be beneficial for both the sides in terms, if you're saying there's a divide over there, which should not exist, but it would always be beneficial, for both the sides, because faculty could learn from students and students, also would learn in the same process. So I would think that, yeah, I would agree to a large extent that what you're saying, that, not all classrooms are like that. I'll give you a one example of that, very interesting example, which I had recently. One of the, I would say second rung B schools, okay, they asked me to be a panelist on one of their, conferences. And I had no time basically to, to be a panelist for this. So I was refusing. I said, no, I can't do this because I just don't have the time to do it. And, but the person kept on persisting and constantly told me why can't you be a panelist? And one day the person calls me up and tells me, okay, you can teach, you can talk about methodology, you can talk about diversity and inclusion. Suddenly when the person said diversity and inclusion, I said, now let me try this out. Okay. And I said, okay, I will talk about issues related to LGBT in the workplace, because that's what I've researched. And that's what I'm interested in. And that's right up on my mind because I've been writing about it recently. And I said, okay, so what do you think? And the person said, she'll get back to me in 2 hours. Till today, she's not got back to me. So that is the situation. So I would think that is, so people don't want to talk about issues related to LGBT, the LGBT community, or students, or expose the students to issues related to the LGBT community. So it could be to a large extent, what you're saying is true. It could be, the situation is not that great in the country, maybe, but there could be, spaces or areas in which students could be themselves, and to a large extent could depend on, faculty who are handling these sessions or interacting with students.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you talked about the the narrow-mindedness of our classrooms and probably the education system as well, I, of course, as a student of grade 12th, I can verify that to a very large extent it actually exists, and it is very true. Students, and it's not only about the LGBT plus students, it's about students in general. I'm saying that their emotions, mental health, and so many areas that they want to be heard about, they want to be understood about, they are not valued at all. And today's schools are only about go to school, study hard, score good marks in your exams, and that's it. That's the end of everything, and whatever you've learned, forget it, it doesn't matter. So that's basically what schools are for today. And instead, what they should be is, firstly, of course, there has to be inclusive education, but till the time there's no basic bit of empathy to allow everyone to be themselves and educate them the right things, educate them what matters, and educate them for the purpose of educating them, not only to mug up things that some of which they don't need. Probably they might need a lot of it, and mug it up, score in the exams, and then come back home, forget everything. So that all of it has to change. We have to be educated about what matters to us. That is what a classroom is. That is what the purpose of education is.
So can I add on to this? And I'll give you another example, okay, and it'll be interesting because sure. I earlier talked about a second rung B school, okay, but I also have an experience of a one well-known school in the country, okay, and I'm reading something about the person who's researching the LGBT community, belongs to the LGBT community, okay, and in his write-up, he writes that it's so difficult for him to even take up this topic, in spite of the school having an image of being very inclusive. But when he said that he's researching the LGBT community, it was very difficult for people to accept that. And he's been warned that, if you research the LGBT community, probably it will impact your career. Okay, so I am like, okay, this is the school and it's, well known and it has an inclusive image, but he has faced problems of even, choosing a topic to research and talking about and saying that he wants to research the LGBT community is had become a problem for him.
Oh, that is the same thing which actually I have experienced. So I went to a very well-known postgraduate school in India, right? And I wanted to look at something, and one of my female professors during that time, she said something like, "Oh, why do you gay people always want to wear your sexuality on your sleeve?" And then I was so mad at her, and I was just like, "Why do you want to wear your womanness on your sleeve all the time?" And we got into a heated argument and all of that. But that is, it's something that sort of makes me curious as to why is it necessary to talk about identities, or why is it necessary? And Ernesto, you've worked in it for a long time. You sort of look at inclusivity in workspaces and workspace organizations. Yashwardhan, you're part of this amazing campaign that your school is sort of doing. Why do you think is it necessary to talk about your sexuality or your caste or your identity in these spaces?
I think, firstly, we need to talk about LGBT plus inclusion at school level, because so that we actually reach a point when we won't exactly need to talk about it in such a way. So what I mean is that School level is when people learn the most and gain the most amount of awareness, and that is basically the foundation of a person's life, a human being's life, and possibly even the whole society's life. And again, that's the whole point of education after all. People develop the most during their school level, and that's why it is important to inculcate the values of inclusivity. And if we don't talk about it, then especially in today's world when there's so much stigma, so much lack of awareness, if we don't talk about it, then how will we ever create awareness about the topic to start with? So yeah, that's basically why it's so important to talk about it.
I would think that when you're talking about inclusion, you're talking about dignity. Okay, in the sense that once you're talking about including people, they would certainly have a sense of dignity, and that seems to be very important to anybody. So the inherent sense of dignity is relevant to everybody. Okay, and beyond that, if you do not get that sense of dignity, why do I need to go to a workplace? That those issues will arise. Why do I even have to come to a workplace where I'm not even counted? I've not been even given that sense of dignity. So I would think that for everybody, it's important to have a sense of dignity, and for everybody, it's important to be included. Okay, now one can look at it from an ethical angle. Okay, that being inclusive is ethical. You can also look at it from a business angle. Okay, being included could be, from a business angle, and in a B school, probably probably sometimes is more appealing than the ethical issue. Okay, though I would think that the ethical issue should override all business considerations, but that may not be the case. To even tell them that, for them to even accept the business angle would be an important progress in some sense. So even if you can, tell them that, being inclusive is also being, it's profitable for business, and, that also would make, but overall, I would think that being inclusive would be, giving some dignity to people, for irrespective of your demographics or your identity in that sense.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Do you have?
Yeah.
Okay, do you have any? Yes, Yashwardhan, you were saying.
Yeah,
sorry.
Absolutely, I completely agree with Ernesto. And about dignity, once a person's, like anyone over here also would agree that for us, our dignity and our self-respect, they are possibly the most important thing to us, to all of us. It's with every human being. And when we feel isolated, when we are made to believe that we don't belong at a certain place, then of course that will be hard on us, that will be hard on everyone. And that is exactly what the issue is over here. People get a feeling that they don't belong here, they don't belong in this entire environment. So again, that, those ethics, that inclusivity has to come in. That is where it comes in.
So, Yashwardhan, your school is doing some amazing work with the Breaking Barriers campaign. And also, I know in IIM Ahmedabad, there's a very active queer club. What kind of activities take place in such a club? Or what kind of activities?
So we launched Breaking Barriers and it was started with an attempt to sensitize senior school students about human rights, and especially now about the LGBT plus members, by highlighting and addressing the prejudice against the members of this community through years of stereotyping and social conditioning by the society. And we started in 2013 when absolutely no one, used to touch these topics at all. Everything was brushed under the carpet. And today, proudly, we can say that we have sensitized over 5,000 students and counting. So we have always been hosting 1.5-hour sensitization sessions with various institutes that invite us, which of course we are planning on sort of upgrading into being more interactive and more impactful. And our campaign members have been attending every single Pride parade since 2013. And of course, we have zero tolerance for sexuality-based bullying in and around our school environment. And we have this Thrive magazine, which is the world's first e-magazine for students. And we contribute articles, videos, and poems for the Thrive magazine. And we basically run with the aim of, encouraging everyone to respect diversity in all forms and foster a school climate open to dialogue and accepting of differences. And I feel, most institutions should have, an organization like this, because for a simple reason, they show great promise in reducing discrimination. And here we are talking about LGBT students. It promotes their well-being, it fosters a safe and affirming school environment. And I feel most schools should try to, give it an effort in, having organizations supporting human rights, and offering to start such a group at a school, or becoming an advisor for an existing one. That can help a lot. And, that will ensure that students have positive experiences around at the school. And imagine every student in the world growing up and having that positivity within themselves. And this is something that cannot come from within. It comes from past experiences, from awareness, education, and that is what leads to empathy amongst people. And again, that is what the main importance of having these sort of organizations is.
That's great. What kind of activities happen at the Queer Club in IIM Ahmedabad? Because I believe they have a lot of work pressure, studies, like it's of a very different kind of space and time where people occupy it.
I would think that, having something driven by students is the best thing to do things. At least I would think so, because the way things have been changing and the way, the issue of the LGBT community is being discussed is interesting. I think and one would owe it to the club to, raising awareness about the issue. Okay, so they raise awareness, collaborate with other clubs, okay, have contests, show films, sometimes probably put up skits. Okay, so these are some of the activities they do. They also celebrate Pride Month, okay, and they also run some campaigns, that you support inclusivity. Those kind of campaigns are run by them. So this is what they do, and I think they've also, in some sense, opened up the discussion on the issue, okay, which probably was not discussed, or we did not really, in some sense, not really bother about earlier, is now being discussed. It's right there in the open. So, and people are quite okay to be a part of at least the people who have spoken to, who are a part of the club, find that it's quite nice, and it's quite, and IIM is quite a safe place. At least that's what they say.
But what kind of changes over time have you seen, that this kind of visibility of queerness brings about? Like, we've seen how often, visibility is so important to sort of for social acceptance and inclusivity, but is it addressing some systemic issues which lie in the curriculum or sensitivity of people who are in positions of power? In this case, the educators and the administrators and the management committee. And has there been some systemic changes in both, like, your school and the college in terms of what this kind of visibility can bring about? Do you have any anecdotes to share?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, understood.
Okay. In terms of visibility, at least I would think there's high amount of visibility, and people are open to discuss the issue, okay, which may have not been the case, say, 7, 8, 9, 10 years ago. I would think that people would not probably discuss the issue. Of course, some faculty also have been, contributing to it in some sense, because they've been inviting guest speakers from the community, discussing it, sending invites to people to come and attend these lectures and so on. So it has, in a way, brought about some change and some discussion. With regard to admin, I don't think that's a major issue, because we have somebody at the moment who has been transitioning, and I think I don't know the case at the moment exactly what's happening, but I think the person has been given leave, so that they can finish their studies a little later on. So there's a prolonged time given to the person, and I don't think there was any issue in giving the person time to finish the study. So So I have not seen any kind of resistance from the admin in some sense. In fact, they first start as a special interest group, before it becomes a club. Only after you have a sustained kind of interest in the club, that it in the group, then it becomes a club. And then the club gets funding from the Students Affairs Council, which the institute provides some funding to the Students Affairs Council, which passes on to different clubs. So depending on the interest, it moves on to become a club. So I would think that in some sense, the interest levels have increased. It's one indicator of it from moving from a SIG to a club. Yeah, so that's how I would, at least that's the way I would look at things at the moment. Of course, at the same time, I would also say that, there could be issues that need to be still addressed, and they need to probably be looked into. But I remember, some time ago, again, when I was researching issues for trans people, and there was a trans person who had passed out from here, say some couple of years ago, and she asked me, that what is the procedure to change my name on certificates? Okay, and I immediately asked the office, and the office immediately told me, you just tell the person to get in touch and we'll change the name. Okay, so that's not an issue at all. Okay, which in other places could have been difficult. So looking at it from that angle, I think, okay, so it's possible to do it. It's not that there is resistance to it. So at least the admin office here was fine to help the person out in, changing names of certificates and so on and so forth. So that's been my experience. But I would still think that there could be areas where improvement is required.
That is great, because I was talking to a bunch of my colleagues about having a gender and sexuality sensitization workshop for the teaching and the non-teaching staff members, because I noticed certain instances of, prejudice talking, inherent sort of homophobia, stuff like that. And they've been strong allies for me otherwise, but, they sort of just shushed it down, and they were like, oh, you go see what other colleges are doing. This is a very safe space. It'll get too messy. Who's going to pay for it? Or, or things like, oh, we just did a workshop for handicapped people last month, so we can't do another sensitization workshop anymore. And something similar happened in other college, where I was proposing a sex education workshop for the students, because I heard through the grapevine about a lot of sort of unsafe sex practices that were going on in the student community. And from my own personal experience, I can also say that school and colleges are both sort of spaces which not promote, but which spark a lot of intimate interactions. But I've always just met with so much hostility and incredulity when I even suggest that. And always it has been that my sexuality gets dragged into the conversation, where it's like, oh, you want to talk about it because you're gay, and that's all you guys want to talk about. And, what do you think about, say, the position that institutes or organizations or schools should have sort of towards sex, or have some proactive strategies such as condom dispenser machine, along with a tampon or sanitary napkin dispenser machine, stuff like that. And I'm also sort of curious to know how workplaces and school spaces, both in terms of teachers' response or in terms of, parents' response to this idea of ickiness of sexual practices in campuses.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Carry on. Sure.
Okay, so I'd say that safe sex is something that over the years hasn't been talked about much, but now I think institutes have started carrying out sex education. Like in our school, we have sex education being carried out every year, and even CBSE in its new education policy is planning on bringing in the topic of sex education. So with this regard, we are probably going towards the right direction, considering all the changes with the environment that are taking place these days with this topic.
Yeah, when talking about condom dispensers, I don't think we have it on campus. Okay, but I think they have. I I I don't recall, but I think they have. Sanitary napkin dispensers. I think they have that, or they used to have it, or I'm not very sure at that. But maybe it's, as you're saying, it's probably something which is required and needs to be looked into. Uh, but I don't think we have, at least we don't have condom dispensers. Do we have, chemists on campus and all that, which could, in some sense, be easily available? Talking about it in terms of whether there is an orientation program talking about issues, related to safe sex, I'm not sure whether we do that or not. I am not sure because I'm not a part of that orientation programs. I don't know whether they do it, but they certainly would talk about, issues of gender and, LGBT issues, and how when during the orientation program about how one could address those issues and whom they should go to address those issues. But issues of safe sex, I'm not very sure.
Okay, we are almost at the end of the panel timing. I just have like a series of quick fire questions for both of you to sort of, either one of you can respond to or both of you can respond to. Okay, my first question is, how do you create a safe space around yourself as an ally? How do you sort of ensure that others feel safe and brave around you?
Firstly, we need to, understand about inclusion and exclusion, and we can't go to the right direction when we aren't even aware about the whole road. And we always talk about how, we should use inclusive language, not make groups according to gender identities and all those other things, which is important as well. But all that is, I would say, it's secondary. First, we need to understand the topic and why the changes in mindsets and behavior is even required. And most importantly, we should treat people normally, and just, how you would treat your friends, how I am treating anyone around me. That's, or even students for an educator. And inclusivity is something which is a shared responsibility. One person cannot do it alone. It requires a collective effort from all educators, from all students around, from everyone belonging to that environment.
I would just say in one word, like, don't be judgmental about people's preferences.
Okay. What do you do if your peer or your student or your parent comes out to you?
I would be accepting of it, and I would not think anything about it in terms of, as I said, judgmental about it. The person wants to be, or the person has that orientation, that's fine. And one should be more accepting. At least that's what I would think.
I'd say that, firstly, as I said, I'll treat them normally. And if they are sort of not proud about it and sad about it for sad but obvious reasons, then encourage them, be with them. And most importantly, treat them normally, just like a friend of mine. And always, speak up whenever I hear a homophobic comment as well. Like, there are people using words like gay as an insult, transgender as an insult. There's no harm in, speaking up. There's no harm in educating yourself about this. And I would always avoid saying things like, I knew it, or it's just a phase. And all that can be discouraging as well. It's important to not shut down the person and not invalidate the person, and not be judgmental towards them, as Ernesto said.
Okay, do you feel that your curriculum that you're studying right now or that you're teaching is inclusive, or what are some strategies to make an inclusive curriculum?
Currently, I would say our curriculum is not inclusive. It has become better, but it's still, not inclusive. And in fact, I feel it completely eliminates the whole presence of LGBT+. And although I believe our new education policy is bringing in certain changes, so we'll have to see how that goes. But even, simple things like any historical figure can be included in what is taught, so that, there'll be no possible distinction being created. and students can be made to have group discussions on gender stereotypes and myths and so much more. And junior kids, they like color books a lot, so they can be given gender neutral coloring books. So there's actually so much that we can do about this issue, and to make an inclusive curriculum. So that has to be given a thought, a very deep thought.
It actually, in our case, it depends on courses to courses. So each one designs their own course, and you can make it inclusive if you want to. So in my course, when it's a broad course which talks about global production networks, and also talks about diversity and inclusion and how it's linked to the whole thing of global production networks. So in that case, I give a lot of space also to the issues of diversity and inclusion in the course that I teach. And so you can raise a lot of issues when you're talking, because I also give readings which are related to the LGBT plus community, LGBTQ plus community. Okay, so the discussion has to take place. It cannot go under the carpet. You can't. It's not that you can't. You can brush it aside. You have to discuss the issue. And the feedback that I get from students is, we in this course we talk about things which otherwise we cannot talk about, or we don't want to talk about. Okay, so there could be several courses. I'll have to look at the entire list of courses to see where you can insert it. You can certainly insert it in the readings that you give. You can also insert it in terms of whom you call, and you can also, guest faculty, you can call them. You can also discuss it in class, correct? So, because it's open to discussion. So one can also discuss it in class. And one can also see, when you're talking about issues of diversity and inclusion, whether people are included or not, during the course and you can correct things right there and there, correct, if things are not going the right way. So as an instructor also, you have that ability to change things, or to direct things in the which you think are more inclusive, and including people irrespective of what background they come from.
Okay. So the last question, which is for all three of us, which is basically, if you have one thing that you can tell the queer student or the parent or the teacher listening to us today, what would it be?
I would think that let people be themselves, and provide that kind of space for where they can be themselves. Okay. At least as an educator, you need to do that. Okay. And if you provide the space, then or provide the environment, then probably people like to be themselves, and why should they be somebody else?
Absolutely. And adding on to what Ernesto said, allyship is something, a very important term that comes up over here, and it actually has 3 steps that we call it as 3 A's of being an ally. There is acceptance, which is making oneself aware about the topic. There is action, which is of course making efforts and taking action on issues. And then there is awareness and advocacy, which is what basically we are doing. So it is hard to come out in today's time because of so much lack of awareness and empathy. And as I said before, queer people should be treated normally, should be included within our space, should be brought on the same level playing field as everyone else around. Every single human being should be treated with, I would say, equity currently, and once that is achieved, then after that, equality.
Okay. And my comment to you would be, you do you. Okay. It gets better. Yes, things might seem like they are falling apart all around you all the time. Yes, you can cry yourself to sleep every night. It gets better. You will be amazing if you just stop judging yourself by others' labels, by others' sort of notions and ideas of who you have to be. So I'm afraid that is all that the time will permit us to talk about. Thank you, Ernesto. Thank you, Yashwardhan, for this fascinating conversation and lots of insight. Thank you, Pride Circle, for organizing the event. Thank you all for coming today and trying to know more about LGBTQIA plus inclusivity in classrooms. Have a great day.
Thanks,
Bye.
Shemal, and thanks, Pride Circle, for inviting us. Thanks.
Thank you.